In the name of equity and inclusion, the government system has gone out of its way to hire every homo and tranny they could to stick in front of your kid. That's like taking a loaded gun and then pumping it full of hormones and then giving it a gun and asking it to defend your children. Not the first thing I think of when I think of safety. Random thoughts and shenanigans. For the last few years or so, I have seen memes in support of arming teachers. The latest one I saw was of a picture of a handgun, and underneath it, it read, "Teachers." Then, underneath that picture was the same gun with a silencer on it that read, "Librarians." Of course, this should make you smile. And if it doesn't, you're probably a miserable human being that no one likes to be around except for your 3 cats, and that's only part of the time. Though the memes are funny, I really don't believe this to be a solution at all to the problem of gun violence, particularly in public or government-run schools. I have spoken out about this before, but I thought a few more random thoughts might be of use. First of all, I have no idea whatsoever as to how this could be conceived of as any type of solution. To even propose that teachers should be armed, one has to concede that government schools are either that dangerous or that incredibly vulnerable that teachers should be armed. Either way, as a Christian and a father, I think, why on God's green earth do you have your children there to begin with? The government schools hate God. You should not have your children there in the first place. All objectors fail at this point. See the Godly Troublemaker podcast, episode 11, Public School Idolatry. But your kids are there. Now what? Your job as a parent is to ensure their safety to the greatest degree that you can, so you send them to a place that is potentially so violent that every school teacher should be armed. Again, in principle, this doesn't really do anything to address said violence other than to say that it is a deterrent. In principle, this sounds good, right? Most people that shoot up public places are cowards, and everyone knows that gun-free zones are the most dangerous places on earth, and cities with the strictest gun laws are the most violent. So arming all of the teachers should keep the bad guys out, right? However, most school shooters end up dead, and I would argue intend on ending up dead. The reason they go into schools is because of the heinousness of the crime and the attention it receives, and because these people are so messed up that there is some sort of sick joy in murdering the innocent, not just in killing the innocent, but in trying to take innocence in general. These people are sick and deranged and don't care if they die. That's the point. The argument is then, yes, I agree, but if teachers were armed, these sickos would kill less. I think this is true, and I think any public or private institution has a right to secure and defend itself. Why not then have security that is trained in these matters then, instead of arming teachers? Practically, how likely do you think it is that even if a teacher were trained, not just in self-defense, but also in tactical shooting and hostage situations, to pull the trigger on someone that most likely resembles their students? It is one thing to spit moxie by saying you could totally shoot a bad guy, but what about when that bad guy is a child? What about if that child resembles your own? Ask yourself how likely you would be to pull the trigger, and then ask yourself what the probability of success would be just by handing teachers guns. Also, does anyone really believe that arming teachers as a universal principle is a good idea? I grew up in government indoctrination mills and was instructed by my fair share of Miss Lippies who ate too much paste, and that was well over 30 years ago. The vast majority of public school teachers are mentally imbalanced women, and that's just those who identify as women. In the name of equity and inclusion, the government system has gone out of its way to hire every homo and tranny they could to stick in front of your kid. That's like taking a loaded gun and then pumping it full of hormones and then giving it a gun and asking it to defend your children. Not the first thing I think of when I think of safety. All of this to say, how in the world do you as a parent expect teachers who are already a few peas short of a pod to protect your children against imminent danger? This also poses the very real question as to whether or not you're the best person as their parent to even make that decision after sticking them in front of these types of teachers in the first place. You may argue that you would never have someone like that teaching your children. Maybe not. But if your kids are in the government schools, you are certainly supporting those teachers in principle. Not to mention that defense in a public shooting scenario requires highly specialized and continual training. Do you expect the same government system that created most of the problems and can't tell the difference between a boy and a girl to provide such training and to do so regularly? Though arm the teachers sounds pithy, and you would think that in principle could act as a deterrent. To me, is probably one of the scariest scenarios there is. Another question that needs to be asked, and most certainly isn't asked in polite society, and is never asked within the church, because it would greatly offend too much of our meal ticket with 90% Christian parents sending their kids to the government mill, is, do you really think that potential gun violence is a greater threat to your children than the absolute certainty of the secular and godless poison that is guaranteed to be dumped into their mind daily in the government schools? The godly troublemaker exists to shine the light of Christ in the eyes of the idols of our day. We are able to do this because we are entirely listener supported, which makes us cancel proof and beholden to none. Your gifts of any amount support godly troublemaking and enable us to cut straight in a crooked world. Thanks for your support. I am not sorry that I just find all of this stupid and lazy. There is some type of school or public shooting, and the Democrats want to outlaw all guns, while the Republican solution is to give everyone a gun. The shooter killed people with a gun, therefore the gun was the problem. A gun killed the shooter that was shooting people with a gun. Therefore, the solution to the problem is more people armed. The right usually focuses on the subject, namely, the people who use the object to do either good or evil, while the left usually focuses on the object that maliciously caused the subject to commit, in this case, always evil. Though I find the right solution almost always less retarded than the left's, they usually never really address the heart of any issue. And that is the heart of the issue. When I was a kid, I remember kids bringing their rifles to school during hunting season. I remember seeing shotguns and rifles hanging in the back of pickup truck windows. My point being, guns were commonplace and never gave off some magic juju that made people lose their shit and start shooting people at random. In fact, I don't ever remember hearing of a school shooting until I was in college, and that was when Columbine happened. It seems to me that instead of just throwing guns in teachers' hands, we might want to ask how we got from A to B. How did we get to a point, even within the government system mill, where guns were commonplace culturally, with no shootings, to a place where you can't even think about a gun without getting expelled? With school shootings being so common that the only way to fix the problem is to give teachers guns too. For the record, I have no problem with a teacher carrying a firearm. We have the Second Amendment for a reason, and I do not believe that a teacher abrogates that right just because of their vocation. My point in saying all of this is that it is not a solution to the problem, and in fact only perpetuates and will potentially exacerbate an already horrible situation. The schools, as they exist today, are antichrist. Just throwing guns in teachers' hands won't make them virtuous or righteous or brave. In fact, if the teachers in question are any of those things, they probably aren't teaching in the government schools. The question then is, why would you want to turn those institutions into armories, and why would you think that your children would be any safer in doing so? To think that giving teachers guns will fix the problem is in many respects to make the same error as the left. They think that guns make people do bad things. The right thinks that if every teacher has a gun, then obviously they will do good things with it, like killing bad guys. But then that would assume a whole lot, wouldn't it? Of course, this is not meant to be exhaustive. It is simply a few random thoughts after all, or perhaps a shenanigan or two. But then again, I am someone that doesn't believe that we should have government schools at all, which is truly and absolutely the only way to guarantee your child will never, ever be in danger at a government school. Shut them all down. Cheers.